Hi, I'm Jeremy Foote. I'm going to be talking today about this project I've been working on with Jeff Treem at UT Austin and Bart Vandenhoef at the Free University of Amsterdam around enterprise social media and how we can see them as multifunctional public goods. And in this project, we use agent-based modeling as a way to explore how people decide and use enterprise social media. So as an introduction, enterprise social media, things like Yammer, Microsoft Teams, holds this great promise. This is the from the Yammer homepage. I just grabbed this. Their big promises that you can work smarter, work together, connect with people across your organization to make better decisions faster. I mean, that sort of summarizes what all of the promises that we'll all be connected, kind of this global brain. We can decide and understand and make decisions as a group, as an organization better. However, despite this, almost idyllic promise, launches of enterprise social media systems often fail. These are often blamed on either leadership, right, that they didn't do enough in order to, promote the social media, or they chose the wrong one, and then related to that technology, that there's something about the ESM itself that is faulty and that doesn't enable things the right way. But however, we want to kind of push on that and kind of, think of maybe a different angle for thinking about what enterprise social media does and why it might fail. So enterprise social media, we can think of it as serving two main roles. Connection, so this is often nearly synchronous, often one-to-one. And then information storage and retrieval. This is typically asynchronous, and it's non-relational, that it's kind of the relationship between information and the person, not an attempt to connect. These were called connective and communal public goods by Janet Folk et al. And we can think of them as public goods that both the opportunity connect and the kind of information store are public goods, and therefore their motivations to free ride, to get the benefits without giving, without paying the prices to create these public goods. And so we might think of that as a reason that sometimes enterprise social media fails, and indeed for many public goods, participation increases once there's a critical mass. This is the part of the argument made in Marwell and Oliver's book about public goods. We can think of an enterprise social media system and the way people decide whether to use it, that as it becomes more used, it becomes more useful, more valuable. And then as it becomes more valuable, more people want to use it. This is, of course, just a feedback loop that leads to, again, this idea of critical mass. There's feedback, and that once it reaches enough people, it will be successful. So is this perspective, maybe a good way to put our project, is this perspective a good way of seeing how people actually decide whether to use a new enterprise social media system? So we approach this in two different related ways that build on one another. First, an interview study, and second, and based on the findings from the interview study, a set of agent-based models and simulations. So I'm going to talk very briefly about the interview-based case study. So I say we, I was not involved in this part of the study, but we interviewed folks from a branch of a financial company who had implemented an enterprise social media system 2 months earlier, something similar to Facebook or Twitter, but designed for the enterprise. This involved 39 interviews with employees of the company, and involving a qualitative coding approach with open coding, moving to axial coding, moving to selective coding to identify salient themes. So the findings from this study, first is that there were kind of the big finding, there are two stages of participation. First was initial use, where people were determining whether this ESM was going to meet any of their needs, whether it would be helpful or useful. And this involved exploring, testing, experimenting, sort of, right, if we think of, explore and exploit sort of metaphors, that this was figuring out what this is for and whether it's any, going to be useful. And then the second was continued use, that this involved integrating the ESM into one's daily work practices. And participants expressed how perceived critical mass, or whether they thought there was enough critical mass, whether people were going to use the system, determined whether and how quickly they moved from initial use to continued use. And so the motivations for using the ESM influenced how they perceived whether or not there was critical mass. So for people who are primarily seeking to connect to others, they perceived whether others responded to a post or accepted their friend requests. For those seeking communality, or in this case, almost information type goods, they wanted the ESM to have content that was useful for completing their tasks. And so whether or not they could connect with someone, it's did I find something there that helped me to get my work done, or get my work done more quickly. So we took those findings from the study and implemented them into an agent-based model. Agent-based modeling is an approach that helps us to often complement individual-based approaches. This is an argument that Bill Rand made with Ned Smith, that we can kind of use individual level findings and see how they scale up. The agent-based models use computational agents who perceive their environment and act according to rules. We can simulate how their behavior would scale up if people, if they're acting according to the rules that we identify in the individual level behavior. And we can create alternate worlds where the initial conditions differ and see how agents acting according to those rules change their behavior, and how the overall behavior of the system changes if those initial conditions change. So our initial design, here's the interface for it. We have agents who act probabilistically. They log on to the site. They attempt to connect with a certain probability, given that they've logged on. Or they look for information probabilistically, or they add information. So each sort of time step, each agent decides which of these, if they're going to log in, and then if they do, which of these three actions they will take. When their attempts to connect or to look for information are successful, they increase their likelihood of being active or of logging on the next day or the next time step. If they're successful in connecting, then they'll be more likely to try to connect in the future. If they're successful in finding info, then they'll be more likely to look for info in the future. If they found information in this kind of information store, they'll also increase the probability to contribute information that they kind of see it as a useful repository. The information in this kind of information store decays randomly at a constant rate, and so has to be replenished by contributions. So what did we find from these agent-based models? First is that the multifunction nature of enterprise social media can make them more likely to succeed. That when we looked, for example, at like a connection-only simulation where people only tried to connect and didn't pay attention to the information, if there were, if fewer than half of the people were available, then it would fail, right? If fewer than half the people were active, it would fail, because every time someone tried to connect, they'd be more likely than not to be unsuccessful. And so they would be less likely to connect in the future. It sort of is a feedback loop. However, I know it's hard to see from this slide, but this shows the initial activity rates in this combined enterprise social media that includes both connective goods and information goods. And even when only 10% of the people are active, still the information good sometimes succeeds. This orange line sort of shows the median level of success. Y is higher success, we can think of it, the number of people active over time. Even when it starts very low, a few simulations are successful. Each blue line is a simulation. At 20% activity, quite a large number of the simulations are successful in promoting an active community, and at 30 or 40%, really quite a large number of simulations produce an active enterprise social media system, which is something that just does not happen without that information piece as well. So a connection-only system requires a big initial critical mass, or they quickly become a ghost town. But with information, users can come for information and then be available for connection. And so that sort of becomes this kind of nice way that the two sides can complement each other. The second finding is that prioritizing information or connection depends on the nature of the community. So when information decays quickly, information searches are disappointing and people leave the system. It's really hard for a system to work around information that decays really quickly. This also reduces people's willingness to be active and can kill the connective good. And so, if information is decaying really quickly, you're kind of at the cutting edge of something, then, trying to combine these two goods might not be a good idea. There are lots of limitations, of course, one of which that we're kind of working to remedy is that it doesn't include any sort of structure or networks. People try to connect to others randomly. And if in a more structured network, there may be opportunities for some groups, subgroups to be active and to use an ESM effectively, even if the whole system doesn't. But it doesn't include expertise or different types of knowledge that everyone seeks uniformly. So sort of some heterogeneity there also might influence things. But I think that the broad findings are interesting and have some implications, suggestions for organizations. One is that it may be better to build contributors than information goods. That if it's possible to really encourage a set of people to, core group of engaged contributors, they can create an information good and maintain an information good that then leads to connection, to success for everyone. And second, that on the connectivity side, that it may be helpful to have something like notifications to make it more likely that others are active, that increasing the activity level is really important. And ideally that sort of like a jump start, that everyone starts off as active can be really helpful, or at least ways that they can become active. Things like notifications are maybe one explanation for why something like Slack works so much more often than it seems like previous ESMs did, because people are active and findable, and so it makes it seem like there's this critical mass. So really excited to present a more extended version of this in Paris. It'll be May 29th at 9:30 a.m. room 352B. Please come and find us and talk to us about this work. Okay, thank you.